But the key is, right, practice like a jigsaw puzzle. Start with the edge pieces first. Do the introduction, just the intro, Claire. Nothing else. Don't even bother with the rest of your presentation. Mm-hmm. Do that intro 50 times. You run your sales scripts 50 times. You look at the questions, the objections that clients bring up, physicians bring up. Why aren't you applying that methodology in presentation? Do the exact same thing that made you successful in sales. Okay, if they bring up this objection, smile, say this, do this response. Do the same thing in presentations, 50 times the intro. Then do the same thing with the conclusion. What's a great movie with a terrible ending? Terrible movie, then tackle the middle.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Are 90% of the battle in almost everything we do, in performing in an interview, in being confident in front of a physician, in being able to say, I don't know.
100% Claire. You know, what I would say is the fear is a bit different. Because what you'll find interesting, Claire, is when somebody is really young, let's say 3 years old, 5 years old, 7 years old, and this is why I encourage people who are listening to this to do the random word exercise with your family. Kids, nieces, nephews. And the reason is because they'll always do the exercise better than you will. Because they don't care. They just go, oh yeah, bananas are... Whereas the adult is overthinking it. They're going, what banana? What type of thing? What's the possibility? But as they get older, when they're around 10 years old, usually you see a shift. They're scared about their communication. Because at that point they get to a place where the education system has kind of boggled them into believing that communication is a chore. So how does this play into everyone listening? We talked about the random word exercise. So doing that more gives you more internal confidence. And the same way with me. I didn't start coaching CEOs of healthcare companies and all these other people. I started with 15-year-old girls and boys. And I worked my way up over time. And that's really the secret.
Do you think that there's an amount of prep that people should do when they're going to be doing this exercise? Do they talk about, a variety of topics? Is it the same one until they perfect their banana message? What does it look like?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say the random word exercise, my philosophy, but then I'll give you a specific prep for in general for presentations, is the idea that you don't get points for how well you do it. You get points for how many times you do it. So for anyone who's done the exercise less than 100 times, which is everyone listening to this podcast, unless you've heard me speak before, is just do it. Do it over and over again. And until you've done it 3,000 times like me, we're not at the level that we can be. But obviously, you don't have to do it 3,000 times. Just do it 100 times. But the other piece to that, Claire, is the question around prep. What is something that we can do for making President's Club and a sales organization? We're giving informational workshops. We're helping our community of other sales reps to show our process. In that situation, how do you want to prep? I call this the jigsaw puzzle methodology. So those puzzles you used to do as kids, Claire? Those toys? So here's my question for you. When you work on puzzles, which pieces do you start with first and why? It's not a trick question.
Well, I feel like I'm cheating because I've heard you talk about this before, but I would start with the edges.
Absolutely. That's why I had you answer it because
and it's easier for my
I know
kids
you
to
knew
pick
the
them
answer. So it's like, so right, because easier to pick out the box. Absolutely. And then we work our way into the middle. But in communication, we don't do that at all. We're a busy sales rep. Okay, we made presidents. We got to give this workshop next week. So what do? Crap, I got a workshop in 3 days. I didn't prepare for it. So I'm just going to shove a bunch of content in my slides. I'm going to start with the middle first. Shove. And then you get to the presentation and you go, and you ramble throughout the whole thing.
Yeah.
And the last slide sounds something like this. Thanks. Not the right approach. So instead, practice like a jigsaw puzzle. I almost feel like you can give this, you can interview yourself and do that. It's kind of funny because you know so much of my content. But the key is, right, practice like a jigsaw puzzle. Start with the edge pieces first. Do the introduction, just the intro, Claire. Nothing else. Don't even bother with the rest of your presentation. Do that intro 50 times. You run your sales scripts 50 times. You look at the questions, the objections that clients bring up, physicians bring up. Why aren't you applying that methodology in presentations? Do the exact same thing that made you successful in sales. Okay, if they bring up this objection, smile, say this, do this response. Do the same thing in presentations. 50 times the intro. Then do the same thing with the conclusion. What's a great movie with the terrible ending? Terrible movie. Yeah. Then tackle the middle. Here's what I would say to simplify it. Write it out. And practice it. But let me be very clear with what I mean, Claire. Do not write out the whole speech. So if your keynote is 30 minutes, you're only writing out the first 2 minutes. Okay. That's it. So let me give you kind of a contrast. A versus B. So person A, Claire, is more like, okay, I'm going to spend 45 minutes writing the whole thing, and then I'm going to spend another 2 hours practicing the whole thing 2 to 3 times. So after a few hours, what happens? You're tired, you're exhausted, you don't see a lot of momentum because you presented the whole thing like twice. And then you get lunch and you don't look at it again until the day of, and you go, oh shit, I got a presentation again. It's kind of scenario A, which is typical with busy professionals. What's scenario B? Scenario B, let's say with 3 hours. First 2 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever, write out just the introduction. It takes like a few minutes. It's not hard. And then you're going to spend the next hour just repeating that sucker over and over and over again. Then after only an hour of practice, you'll go, wow, this introduction is solid. I am so good at communication. And then you can have a momentum. You're like, oh, I've never seen myself present really. Then the second hour, you do the same thing with the conclusion. You spend 10 minutes writing the conclusion. No, forget about the content. Forget about the middle. Just the conclusion. You're writing out the conclusion. And then you spend the second hour running that sucker over and over again. Boom, boom, boom. Second hour of practice. Your intro and your close are perfect. And you're getting lunch and you're like, yeah, I can't wait to get back from lunch. I'm actually excited to get back from lunch. So now I can spend the rest of my time figuring out the middle.
Okay, so you've got these the capstones, so to speak, of your speech. And then do you feel like mostly people know what they're going to say in the middle? I mean, do they even really need to outline it in depth?
Great.
Oh, nice.
All you need is the key idea. What's the key idea? What are you trying to drive in this presentation? And your content is just, what are the 3 boxes, the 3 tools, the 3 stories, the 3 analogies that you're going to share to defend your point of view? That's it. And then you could write out a bunch of ideas and figure it out, but the key is experimentation. But let me attack on a bigger challenge that I think a lot of the top sales professionals don't really think about, especially the context you gave me, which I'll repeat for the audience, which is you get into presidents and you give a workshop explaining your sales process at a national convention or to people in your own sales teams. That's very typical. I agree. And I was coaching somebody in presidents, and I just asked them a simple question because they were super nervous. They thought they were going to die in this presentation. And let's call her Jennifer. I'll say, okay, Jen. So you're worried about this presentation. I just asked her a simple question. What's the worst thing that's going to happen? Let's say you bomb. What happens? And she responds immediately with, they're going to fire me. I was like, let's think about that. Let's really think about that, Jen. Out of all, how many sales reps are there in your company? She might say, let's say 300. What number are you out of all 300? She goes, 4. She's number 4. And she won like number 1 or something last year. So she's like top 5. And I was like, if you screwed up your presentation, do you think the CEO's really going to fire you? Is that really realistic of a thought? She goes, yes, it is. I was like, are you sure? She goes, probably not. Why? Oh, because I bring in millions of dollars of business. I'm like, no shit, Sherlock. You're the prize. Realize that you're the prize. If you sound like a clown in these presentations, the CEO can't do shit to you. Because they don't want you leaving for another medical sales. In fact, the CEO, I'm sure, is already shaking your hand, buying you $200 steaks, massaging your back for you, because people like you are hard to find. I know I would if I had a great sales rep like that bringing me millions of dollars of business, and all I have to give them as a percentage in a trip to Cuba with their family. Yeah, that's a pretty good deal. If you screw up your presentation at the national convention, I'm still going to clap. I don't give a shit. But the problem is that you give a shit. That's the problem.
Right.
The problem is you're too worried about what other people think of you, when you have to realize that, hey, and that's what the random word exercise does for us, Claire. If you do it so many times, the real goal of the random word exercise is that it removes the fear of judgment. Because after you do it 100 times, you're like, well, I don't even care if I get lemonade. I'll just do it. And then when you apply that into presentations, my God, will you be unbeatable?
I read once that back to when you were talking about this shift that you see when kids turn like 10 to 12. And I heard that that's when, psychologically, our psyche shifts where we start paying more attention to what other people think about us than what we think of ourselves. We start feeling the intensity of judgment and taking it in. So I really love what you're sharing. Okay, so I want to go back to those 3 exercises you talked about.
So I'll give you 4. So I'll give you like an extra bonus. So the third one is question drills. There are a lot of sales reps are probably already doing this if these are the top people in the field, but I'll just explain it really quickly. A lot of us, when we're giving presentations, we're very reactive to the questions from a crowd rather than proactive. So let's say we're standing there and we're presenting, then somebody goes, what about this? And you go, I didn't think about it. But we don't have that problem in our sales process because we know all of the objections that our customers are going to ask us, but we don't apply that mentality in our presentations, Claire. So question drills are super simple. Every day for 5 minutes, reflect on one question that you think people will ask you about your presentations and write out the answer. And do that once a day. If you do that for a year, you'll have answered 365 questions about your field with only 5 minutes of work every day, and you'll be absolutely unbeatable. And that's part of the reason why I'm decent at podcasting. I still have a lot more to go. But the reason I'm decent is not because I'm special or unique or any of that stuff. I've just done the question drill exercise like 800 times. I have people, and you know this, in my community who drill me on like the hardest questions about things that I don't really know the answer to. You're like, what about this? What about this? And I was like, oh, I should probably think about this. So because I'm going through all of these questions, you become invincible in your industry because there isn't a question you don't know the answer to anymore. And then the last one is so simple that no one does it. Video messages. My God, just make a list of people that you care about. And that's also good for you as well, Claire. Take the top 15 clients in your business, the amazing work that you're doing with medical sales professionals. Just send them video message, though I'm sure you're already doing it because I'm sure I've already told you to do it last time. And it just drives so much business for you. My God. It's like free money.
Yep.
Just people don't make it.
But really, you're so right. And when I started implementing video messages, it changed the game. Because even though this stuff has been around for years, no one's using it. So going back to what you said about if you do these kinds of simple, we're not talking about, take a complex course and implement, principles from Plato and Socrates. We're talking about send out video messages, right? Answer questions to yourself. Most people aren't spending the time there. And if you do, my God, how much you can set yourself apart. It's truly incredible. And you see it, you really see it once someone's been in the field long enough that they can start getting comfortable in that OR. When the physician looks at them and says, hey, Joe, this isn't working, what's going on? But you've already answered these questions for yourself many times over. There's that comfort level, which builds trust with your customer to figure it out on the fly. And I mean, the sky's the limit from there. So, and something you mentioned that I don't want to gloss over was ask yourself a question and then answer it in 5 minutes, like I'm doing right now. And sometimes it's about getting those sound bites together in a short amount of time. Do you think most people have, do you think it's easier for most people to expand on something?
So it's expanding in the sense that there's a lot of questions that we'll get asked that we just didn't think about. So when that happens, we get very long-winded as we come up with an answer. Mm-hmm. But once we have an answer, a lot of us also settle for that answer. Oh, well, I know that question, and I know the answer to that question, so I'm just going to keep reusing my long-winded answer. Versus what the best communicators in the industry do is they don't settle for the average answer just because they have one. I'll give you an example. So let's say through all of the questions that you've asked me, obviously I get asked the same questions over and over again. No one's going to ask me what my favorite color is. And it's blue, I think. I actually don't even know what my favorite color is. I think it's blue. It's good. You just got the unique insight. But anyways, the point is I always go back and I always say, how can I answer this question better? So for example, the most important one that you asked me today, how can people get started? My past answers were good, but I feel the answers that I give now are a lot better because they're easier to apply. So in the past when I got that, well, how would you get started? I might say something like, oh, you should go to Toastmasters if you can't afford a coach yet. Go join an accountability group. And these are all bad tips. Or I would say something like, implement the forced silence drill, get a partner, force them to pause. These are all legitimate tips. They work. But the problem with them is they're not instantaneous. Whereas the tips that I share now, video messages, random word exercise, and question drills, there's no excuse. You don't need a partner. You don't even need a coach. You don't even need another human being in the room. You can literally do that like the second the episode ends. So even if I give good answers, I'm constantly never settling for those good answers, and I'm always pursuing what is the excellence that I can deliver on a podcast that no one in my industry is willing to go after. And that's really that willingness to be the best. That's what really pushes you. And we're all doing that in sales. The people are listening to this. We're just not doing it in every other area of communication outside of the sales process. Mm-hmm.
So this seems like something everybody can do. Now I have a question for you because I know you have seen speakers of all different, strength styles. I know you've got your favorites. But when you are looking at two different speakers up on stage, can you anticipate before they even begin which of those speakers is just going to nail it and is like in the zone, ready to deliver, and which one is like, oh no, we're in for a ride? Like, can you tell the difference? Is there like a physical confidence?
I would need to hear them for 30 seconds to make the assessment. And the reason is really simple, because the best communicators are thoughtful about every second. Because for the best in the industry, every second is worth $1 million. So they make sure that every little syllable that comes out of their mouth is worth something to the audience. So it's obvious when somebody gets into me. I mean, we know all those people in our companies. They come in, they're like, oh, what's the update, John? Oh, yeah, we sold like 7. So it's obvious versus, hey, Julie, how much did we sell to? Yeah, so this quarter we had X, Y, Z. These are the metrics that we hit. These are the objectives. These are the next steps. Boom. It's like that person is like ready to go. And they see every sentence that comes out of them as a reflection of their personal brand. They take it as seriously as that. So yeah, it's pretty obvious at that point.
So someone is trying these exercises. They're doing the random word. They're thinking about it like a jigsaw. They're doing the video messages and all of those things. Level 1, right? And so they're getting more comfortable with their message. What's the next tier? What's the next level for people who want to say, okay, I don't only want to speak on stage, I want to inspire on stage? Because one thing I hear frequently from my from my clients who have to go on and speak at a sales meeting is they get up there, but they don't know how to say, or they're not sure what they have to share is profound. Do we need to be profound?
It always starts with, what's the end game? Especially when you're already really good at what you do. Because if you're a top 1% salesperson in the medical field, you're doing really, really well for yourself financially. So the question now becomes, what do you actually want to do with your life? And once you figure out what you want to do with your life, you can then figure out what type of communicator do I need to be to achieve that life. Because there's different types of salespeople, and I don't judge, right? Because everyone's different. It's all about understanding what your goals are. So everything we shared so far, this will, I mean, God, I don't know anyone in the field who does all of this. And I coach a lot of CEOs in healthcare who don't even bother doing this because they're worried about getting FDA approvals for the things. They're not really sending video messages to clients, right? So the key is just doing that gets you far. But then there's different types of salespeople. There's some who are like, you know what, I'm doing $500,000 in commissions, like I'm happy. And that's cool, like be happy. And then there's other people who go, I want more than just that. Like I really want to inspire my team. I want to create other millionaires. I want to teach what I know. I want to create a massive sales team. I want to create this product. I want to impact more people. So for people with the bigger dream, you need to first sketch out that bigger dream. And then ask yourself a few questions. Number one, what is that dream? Be as specific as possible. Is it to be the number one sales rep in your industry? Is it about sharing your product with millions of people? Get really specific about what the goal is. Number two, ask yourself who has already achieved that goal. Because there's always somebody who's gotten that goal. But the third question that nobody thinks about, and this is where I add my little Brenden seasoning on top, is don't just ask yourself who that person is. Don't just ask yourself what their targets were, what their business processes, what their sales process was, their impact dials were. Ask yourself, what type of communicator are they? How are they showing up their communication? And what's the gap with their communication skills versus yours? It's kind of like technology CEOs. Don't just look at the tech CEO you want to be. Look at that person and go, how are they communicating? And communicate like that person right now. And that's how you really start to focus in on transitioning from being an informational speaker to being an inspirational speaker. So when you get to that point, now you're doing very different drills. Now you're going, okay, now I need to listen to an hour keynote of that inspiring medical salesperson who's crushing it in health. And saying, okay, what can I take from them? And start copying their strategies and implementing some of that into your game.
Do you have a favorite speaker out there? I know sometimes, if you guys aren't already following Brenden, by the way, his content is absolutely phenomenal and inspirational itself. But one thing he does really well is, as an observer, he will look at a speaker and break down 3 significant things about their speaking style, which I really appreciate. I don't think there's enough of the observer content on LinkedIn, so I'm really glad that you do it. But
so the key that I want people to take from this is pick your own speakers that inspire you. So for me, those 3 people, there's a bunch. I mean, I love Brene Brown, I love Marissa Peer, but I'd say my top 3, Gary Vaynerchuk, Seth Godin, and Scott Harrison. But let me be very specific as to why I chose these 3 people so people can understand how detailed my thought process is with my goals. Gary Vaynerchuk, because I think he's the best speaker in the world on relatability. He's one of the few people I've seen in this space. I actually can't even name another person who's able to relate equally to the 7-year-old woman who's the CEO of Campbell Soup to the 7-year-old girl. I think it's crazy that he's able to just quickly relate to all of these types of people. And it's weird. He's like on a CEO call, and a 7-year-old girl comes up because she saw him on TikTok, and he's able to quickly switch into talking to that 7-year-old girl. And I want that relatability because I want to attract more people towards my mission. So that's one. Seth Godin is because his mind just works in just a fascinating way. He's able to package information in a way that's so unique that you go like, huh, I've never really seen that white painted wall in that way before. And that's really what Seth's gift is. So I try and emulate it that way, and I've listened to pretty much 95% of his podcast library because I'm always paying attention to that, and I try and emulate that. So you can kind of feel, right, my aggression from Gary, my packaging like Seth. And the third one is Scott Harrison, the CEO of Charity Water. The reason I like Scott a lot is because he's a great example of high-stakes communication. So for us, you know, if we don't get our next sale in medical, okay, we might not hit presidents, we might lose a bit of commission, we might lose a few tens of thousands of dollars of commission. Does it suck? Yeah. Is it the end of the world? No. But Scott's a different game, Claire. If he screws up on stage, millions of people die. That's literally how it works. If he doesn't raise, yeah, it's nuts. And I try and apply those stakes whenever I'm on a podcast. I go, my mentality is, if I don't serve, people die. So that's the way I approach it. So there's my detailed answer.
Oh, God. Oh my gosh! So that's pretty good. I love how you took the pressure way off earlier, and now we are on the other end of the spectrum, guys. But you know what? You've achieved so much in your speaking career, right? I mean, from your early days, and if you guys don't know this, I hope you don't mind me sharing, but your roots in competitive speaking, you've achieved a level where that's where you can go now. Right? You now are going for impact and impacting more and more people around the entire world. Most of us are hopping up on stage to talk about how we, were able to get more sales this quarter other than last. And that's a wonderful thing, but I love how you put that into perspective, because I think that sometimes we need to have that high stakes feeling, that risk to drive us. I know I do. It's got to be do or die for me. I'm either going to do something 100% all the way, or I'm probably going to pass or think about it. So I'm really glad you shared that. Awesome. Well, I know that I could talk to you for hours. I'm so grateful to have you here. Thank you so much for being here with us. And I know that probably everybody listening is like, where can I get more of these tips from Brenden?
The first one is the YouTube channel. Just go to MasterTalk in one word, and you'll have access to hundreds of free videos on how to communicate ideas effectively. It's live, it's interactive, it's free, it's super fun. And if you want to register for that and see me in action, you just got to go to our website, rockstarcommunicator.com.
I love it. I've sat in on one of these and they were phenomenal. It was as informational as it was fun. So if you have some time and you really want to improve your speaking style, your confidence, and not go it alone, do it in a group with Brenden as your guide. This is definitely something I encourage you to go do. Well, thank you so, so much for being here. It's been such a pleasure to talk to you again. And until next time, we'll see you later. And next time we're in Montreal, we'll give you a holler.
2, 3, 4.